Welcome to the Mediocrity. We're the Mediocritics. I'm Kevin.
I'm Dan.
And so today we are going to be discussing Heat from 1995, directed by Michael Mann. Other notable films he's done is things like Ali, Public Enemies, Hancock, Last of the Mohicans, and so he has a lot of well-known films. This one is actually a film that is centered around Robert De Niro, who plays a master criminal whose name is Neil McCauley. He is going after a rogue agent. He's also trying to pull off one final last heist before he retires. Meanwhile, Al Pacino in this movie plays Lieutenant Hannah. Meanwhile, Hannah goes through some things with his family. He has his wife in the movie played by Diane Venora, and he also has a stepdaughter who's played by young Natalie Portman. And so the whole movie kind of goes between McCauley and Hannah kind of butting heads, kind of a cat and mouse between him trying to do this last heist. Meanwhile, Al Pacino is chasing after him. And so we're going to be discussing this movie, things we liked, disliked, pros and cons, and then we're going to give you our final thoughts on the movie. So sit back, relax, and stay tuned. So to start off, this is obviously going to be a spoiler review. The movie came out in 1995, so if you have not watched it, it's on Netflix right now. Pause the video, go watch it, come back, finish the video. If you have watched it, continue on and enjoy. So we're going to start off by talking about some of our favorite aspects from the movie. So Dan, what were some of your favorite aspects that you wanted to kind of hit on that you really enjoyed with this?
Boy, there was a lot. There's a lot to like here. There's just so many different dynamics that are really, really good with the movie that they really just take hold of and ride it all the way through the end. One of my favorite parts about the movie is how they immediately, right from the beginning, they just go right into it and establish the dominance of Robert De Niro's character, Neil McCauley, and just how he runs his organization as a criminal. Or I would actually consider him a criminal mastermind at this point. And they do the same thing equally with Detective Hannah, because they show his dominance in the same exact scene. There's a specific scene in the beginning where they're pulling off a heist from a armored truck, and you can see that they're advanced in tech. They know certain aspects, and they're very, very, very procedural with how they handle the situation. When things go wrong, they do not hesitate. They will kill you without even thinking about it. No witnesses, and they handle their business the right way. And in that same exact scene, Hannah does a really good job. They do a really good job of having Hannah be portrayed in a way that he shows up to the scene and he can analyze that situation. And right in the beginning, within the first half an hour, they establish these characters as very complex right from the beginning. What was one aspect that you liked?
The movie, that's really what you get in this movie. The movie, what you're really, the strong point of this movie is that interaction between McCauley and Lieutenant Hannah. There's other things going on in the movie, which we can talk about when we talk about a couple of the cons that we kind of picked out of this. But a lot of the movie is that dynamic. They come out of the beginning and they set, like Dan said, they set it up where you see how McCauley is, and you see how he runs his men and how, organized and smart he is. And then you see how Hannah comes and he dissects the scene, and it's like there are two of the same people, but they went in two separate directions. One went the route of good and one went towards the more bad side. And so what it was is throughout the movie you see this, and so certain scenes happen. So there's a big scene that is notable is this coffee scene between McCauley and Hannah, where they're just talking, and it's just like this tension because it's at a point where McCauley knows Hannah's coming after him. Hannah knows who McCauley is. They know who each other are, and they're going out for coffee. And the way that happens is Hannah pulls over McCauley, and he's like, "Hey, want to get coffee?" And he's just like, "Okay." And he's like, "Follow me." They go and have coffee, and it's this weird tension dynamic between these two, like, they feel like titans in this movie. They are both so, they stand over and overshadow everybody else in this movie so much that it's, and when they are in this coffee shop, there's this tension, and it's these two men who are respecting each other, but also, they're also just accepting the challenge of each other. So it's this respect and the challenge of going after each other or having the other as an opponent, and they really did a fantastic job of acting. I think it's some of, Pacino and De Niro's best acting.
Yeah, that scene in particular is probably one of the best scenes I've ever seen in cinema. I mean, one of the things I have to say about this movie is the dialogue is pinpoint precise. Every line that comes from our main characters, Macaulay and Hannah, have a purpose. There's not a wasted word in anything that they say. Everything has a direction, and in that one scene, it's really shown, and it really gives you an idea of, even though Hannah is a good guy, he necessarily doesn't do the best things in his personal life or the best things that you think a 100% cop would do in order to achieve his goal. But in the same respect, Macaulay is a bad guy, and he will do anything that he needs to achieve his goal in his career of being a career criminal. But there are aspects in his career where you can actually see that he has a light side, and he actually shows some compassion even in some high tense and really brutal situations. One scene in particular is where they're doing the final heist, and they're in the bank and they're stealing the money, and he is announcing to the people that it is not your money. Do not worry about it. The federal government will insure this money. Don't be a hero. He even, like, small little lines like that you can just overlook, where he says, hey, if anybody has any heart conditions or anything like that, or if you're feeling a little faint or sick, lean up against the wall. And it's brushed over so quickly, but it's really impactful because he's doing a horrible thing, but he still has those considerations in the back of his mind. Like, he doesn't really want to hurt these people, but he will not hesitate to do what he needs to do.
I mean, it's almost where certain scenes, if you took bits and pieces of it, you could make it seem like Pacino was a bad guy and De Niro was a good guy in this movie. Like, you can see they're definitely across the spectrum, where some of them, just because one's a cop, doesn't mean they're not doing things that are morally questionable. And then same thing for, De Niro McNally, that, he's a bad guy, but he is not a bad person all the time. And so I think that was definitely a really strong point of the movie. Another point that I really thought they did really well, and is a strong point of the movie, is the actual use of, like, actual practical effects and things along that line. So, movie came out in 1995, so obviously it's going to have more practical effects than things that are, computer generated and things like
really
that.
No CGI.
Yeah.
Some green screen though, but that's fine. And that's with small scenes where they discuss, like, where they're having, like, a background of the city. It might not even be 100% green screen, but with the quality from 1995, I don't really remember how the tech was back then. It could be just lower camera technology.
It might be.
But if I were to guess, it would seem like it's a little bit of a green screen. But it does not take away from this movie.
Yeah, they do gunshots and things like that are very realistic. Everything in the movie feels very realistic. And it's 1995. A lot of movies you can go back and they will feel dated. This movie is very rewatchable today. It does not feel dated. I think the only thing that really gives away its, like, date is honestly, like, the phones they're using in the cars. Other than that, a lot of the scenes you're watching could have been shot today and you really couldn't tell a lot of it. And so they do a lot of the practical effects good, where it's like car crashes happening and they're actual car crashes, and there's actual, like, when they're firing guns, it feels like real guns. Like, gunshots particularly have, like, a punch to them. It's not this, like, Hollywood kind of gun. It's very loud. It's like when the guns are going, you're not hearing anything else. Like, it's the guns. And so a lot of movies, it's like there's a little bit too much layering of these sounds and things like that, and it kind of takes away from, like, the impact of it. And so that was really strong.
One thing that they left out in those particular scenes was something that I noticed in particular is in those action scenes where they're firing weapons and they're doing things like that, there's no score at that, and in those moments there's no music in those moments, and it really just puts you in that situation, and it really gives you a sense of realism as if you're actually there. It is kind of scary with how loud those guns are and things like that, but it makes you feel like you're on the street while these things are going on. But what else did you have?
As far as pros, that's kind of a lot of it. So I mean, I guess we'll start getting into a couple of the cons, negatives that we kind of could pick out of it. It's a fantastic film, and honestly, what these cons that we're going to be picking out are minuscule. It does not really, none of these cons really changed our rating for it. It didn't drop it or raise it any, for anything like that. The pros far outweigh the cons, and so these are just kind of nitpicky things that if we had to go back or change that we would. So I can start off. So kind of what I mentioned before was that how these two characters really overshadow everybody else. And so I said that, and it kind of could be a pro, but in this film it's kind of a con. You have a lot of, I think, people that could have done better acting roles. There are other characters that could have gotten a lot more development besides Macaulay and Hannah. And what it ends up kind of feeling like is there's a lot of characters and a lot of very short snippets of dialogue, but those two characters are the main development, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but they add a lot of characters that this story progresses with, but they don't really offer the development there. So some of these people are like Hannah's wife and his stepdaughter Natalie Portman. So part of what like happens there is he's going through some kind of relationship problems, which isn't fully described, but kind of, you know, it's, they're having issues with their marriage, and one of these things that happen is Natalie Portman's character, she's the stepdaughter of Lieutenant Hannah, and it's kind of not really talked about. You have a scene in the beginning of the movie where she has a fit, or kind of starts to what appears going to like a panic attack, looking
shows
for,
like hints of anxiety,
looking for like a berets for her hair, and so the wife is helping try and calm her down. Later on, you kind of see her where she's sitting on a bench, and she's like, "Oh, I felt I was just wanted to be alone," and he's like, "Okay, well, let's take you home." Cut to the end of the film. Lieutenant Hannah comes into his apartment, and it's kind of just used as the device to get Hannah to go after Macaulay. But he comes to his apartment, and she's in the bathtub with her wrist and leg cut, and she's bleeding out in the bathtub. Yeah, it kind of went from 0 to 60, and you're just kind of like taken aback, and it clearly was used so that Hannah was in the hospital, and his wife kind of finally gave acceptance of his job and said, "Oh, go get him." That gave him that final motivation to go after Macaulay. But it's just kind of forced with this like dynamic between the dynamic that is there between McNally and Hannah is so overpowering that these other dynamics weren't really played out as well as they could have been or developed, and they kind of just get overshadowed, like I said. So they're there, but they're not as strong, and so you can kind of notice that, and those are the scenes where you're kind of like, all right, when are we getting back to the heist kind of things, and him chasing them, and like those kind of, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of like a big negative that I thought. I mean, no, you kind of thought similar, but is there anything else you want to add on to that?
No, I mean, basically, with the dialogue, where it's some of the best dialogue of any film I've ever seen, but then there's also moments where with these other characters where they didn't develop too much, where the dialogue is so weak, and in particular with the women, which is really disappointing. A lot of the women I felt like were overacted. Their dialogue, the way the writing was for those characters were out of place, and that was basically a part of it. I mean, there's a scene where I can't remember the name of the character, but it's Val Kilmer's character. He's one of the crew members, and he has like a girlfriend or fiance or whatever it is, and she's cheating on him, and Macaulay sees that, and he's trying to grab hold of that situation, and out of nowhere, he's discussing it with her, saying like, "You can't be doing these things. I'll take care of you if that's what you're worried about." And she just snaps out of nowhere, and she's like, "I can't do this anymore. Oh my god!" And it just felt out of place for that moment, because the moment wasn't escalated until she just abruptly burst into dialogue, and it was a little awkward. And then there's also one in particular scene that I wrote down, and I literally had a question mark. There's a scene where the rogue, one of the rogue crew members, he's a new member, when he went off and just shot the guards that were guarding the truck. Macaulay's addressing that situation, and they're gonna kill him. And they go out and they're about to do it, and they see a police car pull up, and they're like, hold on.
Well, yeah, during this, the guy is right at Macaulay's feet. Literally right below him. He just knocked him over. He is on the ground right in front of him. He's over top of him with a gun pointed at his head, and he's about to execute him. That's when these cops pull up, and then the cops turn around, and they're just like, but guess what? Houdini. He's gone.
Yeah, he just gets up, and if you've ever laid on the asphalt and tried to get up and run away as quickly as possible, like, one, you're making a crap ton of noise. Two, like, he's literally right there. You're gonna notice him getting up and running away.
And the whole crew's there. There's like 4 other guys right there.
It was pretty bad. That was, yeah, I didn't appreciate that scene. It just didn't make sense. I literally put a question. I was like, how did he not see him get away? I put it in my notes with a question mark.
But which ends up him getting away actually ended up being a big part of the plot. But so just going past that, we are just final thoughts. I really enjoyed the movie. I mean, like I said, these cons are kind of just picking at a couple little things here and there. Overall, I would, if I was going to give it a rating, I would give it 9 De Niro's out of 10 Pacinos. And I don't know what you would give it.
Yeah, this movie's fantastic. If you haven't seen it, go see it. It's like we said earlier, it's on Netflix. There's no reason for you not to see this movie. It's up there with Casino, Goodfellas, all of those movies. If you like those, this one is just going to be another one on your list. I also give it a 9 out of 10. And it's solid 9 out of 10. Even with those flaws that we talked about that are a little wonky and out of place, it's still a 9 out of 10. So that's just Macaulay by De Niro and Al Pacino as Hannah. They carry this film, and it is some of their best work ever.
So, that was our review of Heat. I want to give a shout out to Chunky Wonky, who actually commented on our intro video, and so we decided to do a review of it. We are going to be coming out with a couple of short podcasts. They're going to be focusing on emotions, and so the first one is going to be sadness. We want you guys to leave us in the comments some of the best, your favorite sad movies, your best cries, worst cries, most impactful sad movies to you, and we may do reviews on those as well. But so keep an eye out for those, and don't forget, guys, stay mediocre.
Did I just miss a review?